Hello everyone and welcome back to another installation of The Game Professor's Take. This is my occasional show where I just dig deeply into a contentious topic surrounding games or a particular game or the gaming community. And today, on N7 Day, we are going to dig into why I like the Mass Effect 3 endings. And I realize I'm probably already starting to get dislikes on this video. As I say that, please bear with me. There are legitimate reasons why I like them and why I see them as functionally purposeful within the context of the games. And that's what we're going to get into today. But to start off, right off the bat, I do want to offer some additional context about me as a player of the Mass Effect series. And the big thing with that is I was not somebody who was playing these games when they came out. I started digging into the series, I think it was 2013. So Mass Effect 3 had already come out. The extended edition DLC had already come out to rectify the original ending and all that good stuff. So because of that, don't have any of the ire that much of the community has from experiencing legitimately undeveloped endings at the very first release of the game. So I do understand that, and I just don't have that context, so don't at me for not having that context. The beauty about really experiencing any form of media, and whether it's a movie, a TV show, or a book, or a video game, is we bring meaning to it through our experiencing of it. And that is even more so the case with video games because we are active participants within the game experience. So if there's no way for me to have that experience because I just didn't play the games at the time when that experience was possible to have. So please don't try to make me have that experience because, again, there's no way for me to have that experience. The other big bit of context that I want to provide people is more about the games themselves, and that is that basically just a reminder, I don't know how widely known this was within the community, but I do find it pertinent to mention, is that the script of Mass Effect 3 was leaked prior to release. So the developers had to come up with a new story. That is why much of the dark energy stuff that was set up in Mass Effect 2 never got fleshed out. And the fact of the matter is, I still think that they made something meaningful and impactful and functionally fitting within the setup that they created as far as the effect that the game series was having and the commentary that the game series was providing on particular narrative concepts. So I do think it's very important to recognize that they had to mid-development completely change everything, and considering that fact, they still came up with something pretty good. I do understand the general dislike of the concept of choices not having meaning and stuff like that, but that's what we're going to really dig into right now, and why I think that actually the choices in the Mass Effect series are meaningful, even though we don't see drastically different end scenarios based on our choices. So the first thing to bear in mind with any sort of game study that you're doing or looking at, or just the study of games in general, is when you're dealing with a narrative game, you really have to grapple with two different elements of the analysis process. You have the ludic or gameplay-based analysis that you have to focus on, and then you have the narrative element of it. And this is something that has been contested within the academic community that is looking at games. There are people who are basically called ludologists, who believe that the narrative elements of a game are not a meaningful element of it, that the only thing that matters is the gameplay itself. And then you have other people, mostly coming from the background that I have, actually, from a literary English background, which are looking purely at the narrative elements and really trying to approach the study of games from a narratological perspective. I'm in the middle. This is something that I actually grappled with while I was deciding that I wanted to do this. And what I've come to realize is that what makes games meaningful, what makes games powerful, is that they have this gameplay element, they have this story element, and it is the blending of these things that really makes it such a unique and powerful experience. And because of this, we have to think about both of these elements when we're looking at something conceptually within a game like choice. Now, let's think about the choices that you have in a game like Mass Effect. You have some really basic gameplay-based choices. Just to start from that point, you have the class that you are choosing. That's going to directly influence the way you play the character. You have side quests that will limit or expand the amount of experience that you can get. That you have the non-player characters that you can interact with that will influence missions that you get in some cases. Prime examples being the loyalty missions, especially the loyalty missions in Mass Effect 2 and Mass Effect 3. But then you also have the narrative choices. And really, if you look at this, if you really think about it, the only choice that I just mentioned when I was talking about gameplay that does not also influence narrative is your class. And even with that, an argument could be made that when you're setting up your class and backstory and all that, you are setting up a narrative for your Shepard right from the get-go, because the backstory that you're giving your character is going to influence the way other characters interact with you. I forgot to mention Paragon and Renegade. That also can very much influence the gameplay elements, especially once you start to get into the Renegade and Paragon prompts that arise in Mass Effect 2 and 3. Those can really, really change the way interactions occur from a gameplay perspective as well as from a narrative perspective. So this really kind of exemplifies the whole point of this element of gameplay and narrative have to come together when you're looking at really well-designed and executed narrative-based games. So to get into my perspective specifically, generally speaking, the way that I view the Mass Effect trilogy, and I have alluded to this somewhat already in what I've already released of my Let's Play so far, is that this is a coming-of-age story. This is a coming-of-age story specifically for humanity as a galactic species. And we are experiencing that through the avatar of Shepard, who is presenting humanity to the galactic community at large as the first human Spectre, as the envoy between the Protheans and the modern galaxy, etc., etc. Because of that, we're effectively put into a position of an adolescent in Shepard's body. Now, canonically, Shepard is in their 30s. I believe they're 29 or 30 in the first game, 32, 33 in the second and third games. I will verify that and make a note if I'm incorrect. But because of that element of adolescence that we're inherently having to experience through Shepard, that means there's going to be a lot of mirroring of adolescent experiences. And in a lot of ways, I think that the function of choices within the game end up doing that. What I've come to realize is there seems to be this mindset in the gaming community that choices have to have palpable, massive gameplay consequences. And that is the only way that they become meaningful. That is the wrong way to look at it when you're dealing with a game like Mass Effect. So much of choice and everything is enveloped within the narrative that the games are presenting. So you can't just have something that's going to be a massive gameplay impact. It's incredibly fitting, in my opinion, that the endings are how much you have done in this game series, how much work you've put into this, how much you have developed as a character influences what choices are available to you. It makes perfect sense. Going back to the idea of it being an adolescent narrative, the choices at the end I find to be reflective of different levels of maturity. So going through all of the possible endings that we have for Mass Effect, I'll go through them in the order that I view as least mature to most mature. So least mature is you do nothing. You refuse the catalyst's options and you do nothing. Reapers win. Next cycle happens. That is the least mature. That is, in a lot of ways, what I would say would be a kid being like, oh, I don't have anything to do with that. I don't want this responsibility. Don't give me that responsibility. I can't handle that responsibility. And just refusing the responsibility. That's what it is. Next, you have, I would say, the kill ending. I kind of flip-flop, but the kill ending I see as the next least mature perspective, because really what you're saying is I can't trust the machines. I can't allow them to continue to exist. And really what it comes down to then is you also, depending on if you have developed the in-game relationships with EDI or with Legion, you're basically saying those relationships don't mean anything to me. I don't care that I have helped these individuals, and in the case of Legion and the Geth, this entire race develop and become fully sentient. And it's still like a little, I'm just going to protect my own. I don't like this. We'll just do this quick Band-Aid ripoff, fix the problem, all that. It's I still find it to be rather problematic in that manner. Next, and like I said, I could potentially flip-flop this with the kill ending, is the control ending. I think that the control ending, because it still allows the machines to survive, it suggests a recognition that life is precious, which to me indicates a greater sense of maturity. But it's still really problematic because Shepard alone, individual consciousness, is controlling everything. It's a really self-centered and egotistical way to go about it, because it's basically saying, yes, I am good enough to control all this. I can do this. I alone can have this impact on the galaxy. And in a lot of ways, you kind of see that as being the envoy between humanity and other species. You are trying to create goodwill, and it is basically your word specifically. Yeah, in the third game, you're doing things with Hackett's permission. Yeah, in the first game, you're doing it with the council's permission. But it's reflective of the kind of influence that the Elusive Man wanted humanity to have on the galaxy as a whole, rather than being reflective of any goodness or maturity within Shepard themselves. So that's why it's almost there. Again, you could really swap the kill and control endings potentially, depending on how you feel. I vastly prefer Anderson to the Elusive Man, so it's really hard for me to be like, yeah, I don't think Anderson's action and choice and perspective on this is as mature as the Elusive Man's, but the Elusive Man, as we know, is a human supremacist, for lack of a better way of putting it. But then finally we have the most mature ending, and that is the synthesis ending. I personally have never done an ending other than the synthesis ending in one of my playthroughs. And the reason for that is I have always striven to create Shepards that are trying to develop and trying to do better by the galactic community, even if they have a rougher backstory. Like my first playthrough, I did the orphan on Earth background, and that background is setting you up to be a racist. It really is. And I was like, I'm not going to be a racist, and I'm going to learn what I can from all these other alien species, and I'm going to try to make the galaxy a better place because of it. And it, for me, even though there's still a bit of an egotistical perspective of saying, I am in the position to make this decision, suspension of disbelief, it's a hero's story. It's a hero's journey narrative. The main character is always going to be the one who has to take that mantle up and make that grandiose decision. It's pure suspension of disbelief for me in that case. I'm not going to dwell on the fact that I can still see some of those egotistical elements, mostly because they're kind of intrinsic to hero's journey stories. So not going to fret too much about that. But it's a recognition of of the development and evolution of life over time. And obviously we haven't gotten to this point in the playthrough yet. We're still in the first game, but when you think about what the Catalyst says about not knowing that this synthesis option was available yet because nobody has been ready for it, the way that you indicate that you are ready for it is by developing those relationships, is by making it clear that not just human life matters, not just Asari life matters, not just Turian life matters, not just Krogan life matters, not just Solarian, etc., etc., etc. And you're saying, hey, Quarians, you kind of screwed this up with the Geth. Have you tried actually talking to them and trying to figure this out? Obviously, there's some interesting cognitive dissonance that the second game sets up when you have the different admirals who are on Tali's side versus against Tali's side, you are really set up to be on the side of Han Garel because he supports Tali. You want to be on his side because he supports Tali. But Admiral Chorus is the one with a better perspective on the Geth. He doesn't want the Quarians to try to destroy the Geth and risk destroying themselves. That's why this synthesis ending is so much more mature than the others, because it forces you as a player, but de facto because of that, it forces Shepard to consider the ramifications of putting these lives above the others, putting humanity above the others, putting the Asari above the others, putting the Geth above the Quarians. There's a reason why you need both Legion and Tali in order to save both of these peoples. You need them both in order to save both peoples. It's all about that development. And while yes, there is that egocentric, I can make this decision for everybody in the galaxy, which is a problem, it still is indicative of overall development and maturity when compared to the other options. So, back to the whole point of this, really, this entire debate and question for me comes down to what is the type of choice within games that is meaningful. And it entirely depends on the game. In a game series like the Mass Effect Trilogy, you have to look at the narrative and gameplay ramifications together in order to see the meaning behind the choices in the end. Yeah, there's not a grandiose change in the war based on, oh, you didn't have that one conversation with Liara. You didn't talk to her, and now the entire war is going to be completely different. No, that's not where the changes are going to be. It's going to be in the narrative. It's going to be in the implications and ramifications of what happens in the narrative. And based on the development of an object like the Crucible, it's a weapon. It's a big giant weapon that's going to shoot a big giant beam and do something. What is that beam going to do? Yeah, it's 3 choices. It's 3 different colors, and it ultimately has an impact on the appearance of the galaxy afterwards, but it's the narrative that changes the most. It's the narrative and the effect of that narrative upon the player, upon the character of Shepard, the implications of that when you're considering Shepard as a protagonist, all of these things. That's where the meaning is, and that is why the ending of Mass Effect 3 is good. So guys, that is this episode of the Game Professor's Take. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to hit the subscribe button so you always know when I have new videos coming out, and follow the links in the description to the Facebook page and Discord server so that you can join the conversation. We will be continuing our Let's Play of Mass Effect next week. I apologize for the lack of videos during this week. Last month was quite exhausting for me, so I needed a bit of a break. So more Mass Effect next week, as well as more Assassin's Creed, and of course more Stardew Valley. But until next time, everybody, this is your Game Professor signing off. I will see you then.